Hey, this is Brian Wright, the coach, here to talk about what I've seen going on in MMA today, UFC in particular. Very interesting time we're in. The UFC cuts this $7.4 billion deal or more with Paramount. They leave ESPN, and now we are basically in the entertainment and sport era of MMA. I believe this is closer to what the UFC was in its inception than what it became during the Fox and ESPN years. Now you've got a massive media company that has given a tremendous amount of money to the UFC to put on all of these events. I believe it's 36 events they've got coming up just with the UFC alone this coming year. Now, no more pay-per-views. That sounds great from a fan perspective, but from a fighter perspective, I don't know how I feel about that. We've got fighter pay not really changing, but we've got a bounty for finishes now, which again, this leads directly into the entertainment era of MMA. So now, instead of it being sport, we're pushing towards spectacle. We may not like that, but that's the truth of what's happening here. When you have a $50,000 bonus waiting for you, you're going to go a little bit harder, which means the fans are going to get the show that they want. Paramount's going to get the entertainment, but fighters are going to take the damage and, careers are going to be shortened and there's going to be a lot more trips to the hospital than we've had in years past. You could say I'm, nitpicking a little bit or I don't know, being soft about it. But as a sport, if you look at, say, the NFL had the CTE issue pops up and they had to address it when they realized that athletes are having long-term effects from the sport, which is inevitable when in football, every tackle's a car crash. Every fight is the same thing. But the NFL, their response to it was they changed the rules and they changed their protocols. Now, the difference between the NFL and the UFC is that in the UFC or MMA in general, when a fighter gets hurt or a fighter's having issues, they're not going to get paid. In the NFL, if you get hurt, you've got a battery of tests, you're being put on the sideline, you're still getting paid. You know, fighters don't have that safety net. Fighters don't have the ability to sit on the sidelines. They financially need to get in there. So they're going to take much greater risks. And they're also getting a lot lower pay. An NFL athlete, I believe it's $1 million to be a third string riding the bench who never takes a snap. Where in MMA, it's only the top 5 in each division that's really making the serious money. Guys are making better money than they've ever made. UFC pays better than all the other organizations out there for the roster. They offer better medical care. They offer better opportunity. It's just that the structure of the sport is such that the only way to get the rewards is to take the big risks. Is it fair? No. Is it fight sports? Absolutely. Now, I don't want people to think I'm taking shots at anything. I'm just questioning the structure. I think the UFC with the PI, with its standards of practice, with what it's provided, has dramatically increased the safety of the sport. I think that the regulation, the organization, the medical, it's much better than it ever was. Does it need room for improvement? Yes. And I think the improvement just comes from the structure level. If you look at what's happening, the UFC lowered the barrier of entry over the last couple of years in particular, where the Contender Series came into play. You used to have a minimum of 6 fights to get on Contender Series. You had the top guys in the regional shows were coming in and battling it out to get their spots. Now the regional shows are less and less. MMA is growing, but the opportunities to actually fight are lessening, especially here in the United States. We don't have a good farm system. We have a couple strong regional shows that become the feeders. But overall, we have less opportunity to get the experience we need to put high-level, highly experienced athletes in the UFC. You have guys going to Contender Series with 1 or 2 fights. They're putting on an entertaining show, not necessarily a high-level MMA experience, but if you get 2 guys with the right mix and they put on a show, Dana and Mick and Sean get all excited about it and they sign these guys and they put them into the meat grinder that is the UFC. So Contender Series, I'm not going to say it's a problem, but I think it shifted from what it was meant to be into now it is the main recruiting tool, where the regional scene was the recruiting and the development tool. And then Contender Series was where you were going to pressure test them so that we would get a higher quality of person going to the UFC. Now, less regional shows, more contender opportunities. So you're getting a much shorter runway to get into the UFC, which means less experience, which means less quality. So we have a lower level of quality being brought in, and now they're battling it out. The UFC roster is what it is. I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head, but the amount of guys that it takes to make these numbers is much greater. So what I mean by that is, you have a lot of guys getting a contender, getting into the UFC. The UFC, let's just magically say it's 800 athletes. I don't know if it is or isn't, but let's say it's 800 athletes, but it probably takes 1,200 athletes to keep that number at 800 because there's so many guys coming in and out, because guys are coming in with low level experience and then they're getting in there and they're having really crappy performances. So you have guys going 0-3, 1-3, whatever, and then they get cut because they just don't have the ability to maintain. Now, from a business model, it works. Because when you're coming into the UFC, you're making 10-10. So you come in, you lose 3 fights. The UFC paid you 30 grand. They took some old timer and they were hoping you would knock them off, or they put you up against another low pay guy and they filled spots. It is what it is. Now, again, from a business perspective, I think the UFC is doing the right thing. They're bringing in guys for low level of pay and they're having them prove themselves. They're getting the octagon time and they're getting developed. Some guys are going to break through. The vast majority are not. It's always been that way. But the level in which they're starting to be tested being so low, the breakthroughs are just going to be few and far between. We're going to have less and less guys coming off contender and making it to, say, championship quality. This was the same thing with the Ultimate Fighter back in the day. We had a lot of people that got into the top 5 from the Ultimate Fighter because the original Ultimate Fighter seasons truly were the best people in the country at the time. And then it just became a show you got on because you were just looking for a quick way to get into the organization. Contender's the same thing. It was a lot of really good people. Then it just became people filling spots. And now you have a roster that's getting filled up by guys that have under 10 fights. And they're talking about developing them. But man, being developed in that octagon is rough. The UFC is an absolute meat grinder. So with all this rambling and things I'm saying right now, what I just would like to see is we return a little bit back to a regional support model where these shows get more support and more coordination so that we can have regional shows that actually develop talent a little bit longer. And so that the Contender Series goes back to being what it originally was supposed to be the best of the best. And then the best of them are the ones that get into the UFC. So the UFC's quality stays higher. They can still keep the same volume, but fighters need better work, which means the regional shows need some support so that they can pay fighters a little bit better, so that the fighters can actually afford to be developed, and the whole system will just kind of move. I don't think it's a big shift. I think we just have to develop a farm system, and we have to look at the longevity of athletes a little bit more clearly, and we have to give them a better financial path. The problem with fighters also is that if you speak up and you go against the organization, they do have the ability to cut you and replace you very easily, because for every guy that's fighting for fighter pay, there's 100 or more other guys for every spot on that roster that will take base pay or less just to be able to say they're a UFC fighter. Because the idea that the UFC is going to make you or give you this opportunity is just so great. Um, guys are willing to sacrifice or not even think. They just want that logo. They just want to be able to say that they were there, that they fought on the big show. They think they're going to, open an academy and get a starring role in a movie or something. It's really wild how people have been brainwashed to believe that just being a part of the organization is going to do so much. Yes, being a part of the UFC is an amazing thing, and it does a lot for your career if you do the right things with it. It's not automatically you're going to be famous. I call UFC fame fake fame because you fight in the UFC. You're going to be now on Paramount, used to be on ESPN. You're going to have a very large audience looking at you. You're going to have a lot of people that are going to say, oh my God, you're a UFC guy. Uh, you're going to be the most known you've been to date in your life. You're going to feel famous, but you're not really going to be making any money. You're just going to have more exposure. So the only way to be famous is to put yourself in a position where your recognition creates leverage that's going to create more income for you and more opportunity. And that comes from winning fights and being somebody worth watching. So that's a developmental thing. You need time. You have to introduce the audience to who you are, and you have to have successful outings in that octagon. You're not going to be a losing fighter or a one and done guy and be set for life because you went to the UFC. So we've got to put a little bit more perspective on it. We've got to get a little bit more organized. We have to train athletes the same way other big sports do. I think we should have financial literacy. I think we should have media training. I think we should be doing more to prepare athletes for the opportunities that they get. Right now, you get in there, you do your thing, and if you can figure it out, great. If you can't, oh well, move on to the next guy. So I guess the thing I'm looking at with this Paramount era is fighter pay is not really looking to get that much better. The pay-per-view system is gone. So how are we actually going to figure out fighters' worth and value? And then the experience that's coming to the table. You're chasing this 50,000 bonus. You got guys that are going to put on wild shows. I don't know if we're going to see necessarily more skill. I think we're going to see more reckless behavior because that pressure to finish. So you could make 20 grand in your debut, or you can make 70 grand in your debut based off of a finish. So it's going to be wild. It's going to be violent. It's going to be what the fans want. But again, long term, UFC made its money. They got their billions. Now, are we going to be able to keep feeding the machine in a reasonable way? Are we going to be able to improve the quality of the fights? Are we going to be able to give the athletes a real sport instead of just creating a spectacle, a gladiatorial arena of entertainment? It's that balance we got to figure out. So, yeah, these are the things that I've got going on in my head when I'm looking at what's going on. I think the UFC is the best. I think Dana absolutely deserves praise for what he's done. And I think, the future is going to be interesting, but I just think we have to do some work to make sure that we stabilize what's going on and, give fighters an opportunity to have real careers, not just flash in a pan. So this is Brian Wright. This is what I'm thinking of. Peace. I'm out.